Post-World War II Europe, the Marshall Plan. September 2, 1945 marked the end of the World War II conflict. The war left an estimated 15 million military people dead, and at least as many citizens dead, although we cannot be entirely sure how many died. According to the Marshall Foundation, during the 6-year conflict, most of Europe's significant parts and infrastructure had faced disrepair from bombings and domestic war activity. Most of the urban and even some rural establishments had been reduced to piles of rubble. Millions of families had been separated and were now homeless, forced to often migrate in search of employment and adequate food sources. World War II left countries with shortages in the necessary resources for their civilians. The war effort consumed most of what countries could produce at the time, and everything else was typically damaged by the war itself. European countries were left in disrepair and in need of vital assistance from other countries whose impact from World War II was less of a domestic hurdle like the United States. Part of Europe now faced post-war transgression with the occurring elements of starvation and poverty, which inspired a growth in the occurrence of communist governments. With the spread of communism possible, the United States, outside of allied interests, had the obligation to intervene in helping get Europe back on its feet, while stopping the spread of communism. It became clear to the American government that saw national economies as a way to relieve political instability. George Kennan and William Clayton provided essential expertise in crafting the idea for a recovery plan for Europe. During one of his speeches, sitting Secretary of State George C. Marshall introduced a program that would benefit broad economic relief to European states. This plan was dubbed the Marshall Plan after the Secretary, but was officially known as the European Recovery Program. The Marshall Plan was put into place in 1947 under the stipulation that European nations work together for mutual benefit. According to the Harvard Gazette, Secretary of State George Marshall agreed with the idea that relieving an economic crisis could eliminate the spread of communism in Europe and ultimately revive its entire state, saying, Marshall's premise was straightforward. Economic crisis, he observed, produced social distratification, which generated political instability. President Truman saw the Marshall Plan as a way to cease and contain the spread of communism in the Western Europe. The President authorized, with the support of Congress, the Plan for Economic Recovery into law in April 1948. The Marshall Plan was originally offered to all European countries, including the Soviet Union. The plan was accepted by the following countries: Austria, Belgium, Denmark, France, Greece, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey, the entire United Kingdom, and Western Germany. The Marshall Plan was, however, rejected by the communist governments of the Soviet Union and Eastern Germany, as well as Poland and Hungary under the influence of the Soviet Union's rejection. The Marshall Plan was very successful in aiding the European nations after World War II. The Marshall Plan lasted for 4 years, ending in 1951 with the stabilization of European governments and economy. The European Recovery Plan initially took the form of food staples, fuel, and machinery from the United States that allowed for an investment in an industrial capacity in Europe. It was established that in the 4 years of providing economic relief to Europe, some $13 billion worth of economic aid was used, helping to restore industrial and agricultural productions, establishing financial stability in Europe, and expanding trade globally. The European Economic Recovery Plan primarily consisted of direct grants with little relief taking the form of loans. The United Kingdom and France established a working suggestion for a 4-year recovery plan for Europe, which was later replaced by the Organization of European Economic Cooperation that admitted West Germany. During the time of the European Recovery Plan, Western European countries experienced a 15 to 25% growth in their gross domestic product. The trade relations established during these plans led to the formation of the North Atlantic Alliance, which in turn shaped the beginning of the European Union that we know today. The Secretary of State, George C. Marshall, was presented the Nobel Peace Prize for his effort in the recovery of Europe after. Overall, the Marshall Plan saved the war-torn Europe after World War II. It was an American effort to reestablish the economies of European nations, which was responsible for the containment of communism in Europe. With the aid of the $13 billion by the American government, Europe was able to survive and again become a hub of culture and civilization. Without the Marshall Plan and the American commitment to aid in our neighbors in rebuilding much of Europe, Europe would be an entirely different place than what we know today.